So today I'm joined by Nikki Quittner from Test Before You Invest, and we're going to have a conversation around due diligence for buyers and also issues for selling agents around things they can do to add value to the selling process. So welcome, Nikki.
Thank you very much, Michael.
So perhaps we can start off. So for people who don't already know, your product, Test Before You Invest, is a due diligence product aimed at buyers, and it's around trying to get a sense of what they can do with a property once they get it. So perhaps you could give us a bit of a history of how you came up with the idea and a little bit more about the product.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks for having me. So, in essence, Test Before You Invest is backed by years of experience in architecture. So I've been practicing as an architect for over 10 years. And I found that there was a missing link between the advice that builders will give at a building inspection where they can assess what the current condition of a property is.
Yep.
And people wanting to understand the potential of property and what's possible. And typically to extract that kind of information, you're going down a full architectural process and you're spending a lot of money and a lot of time. And at the end of the day, before looking to purchase a property, what you really want to know is that big picture information. So what I loved about this idea was how much it could complement the building inspection. So you've got what is the current condition of a property and what might be possible for the property. And so working through Test Before You Invest, we were able to create a service that is quick and affordable and backed by the experts to give them that big picture information of how many extra bedrooms they might be able to add to their house, and also how much it might cost, giving different cost scenarios. So it gives them all those really big picture items that people, when they're walking into a property, go, what can I do and how can I do it? Not only that, we help people through the process, which, as you know, is quite a complex process of developing a property. And so we help them by saying, you know, how would you set up a budget and what are the timelines and processes involved with getting your design to a point where it's actually going to be built.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because with the building inspection process, which is part of the service that we provide, we often get buyers asking our building inspectors, so can I put another story on? Can I add here and can I add there? And while the building inspectors have that building experience, and they can say, yes, the structure could support another story or whatever it is, they can give some information around that. They don't have that council development approval knowledge, and they can't really provide much detail, often because there's too many options. Like, you know, for a lot of people it depends what's your budget, how much would overcapitalise, that type of thing. So there is a gap there for people, which means that, and because they have to do their due diligence mostly ahead of an auction, for example, they're in this unknown area where I don't want to spend too much money because I don't even know if I can buy this place, but I'd really like the place. And yes, we might need to add if our family's growing or, you know, if we want to make this a long-term home. So there is a gap there. And I think, as you say, it does complement the building inspection
particularly,
process.
as you said, you know, the big one is, can I move that wall? Can I blow out that wall? And whilst there's certain information that we can offer, as you said, from a legislation point of view, it's really great to work directly with builders who have an understanding of what the foundation condition is, what the wall is built from, and then we can work together to understand, sure, we can move that wall, we can blow that out, we could put a kitchen in there. And the great thing about this service is we can take it as far as you want to take it. So the typical report tells you not specifically what you want to do, that gives you all the options so that you can formulate your brief yourself. Because as you said, people come into this going, there's a million different options, and we don't want to, at such an early stage in the piece, say this is the one option you should do, because in design there's so many opportunities, and that's our report. It's opportunity driven. It's supposed to get buyers more confident, more excited about their purchase. So it's about putting it on the table for them to say, for example, on this particular site, you could add an extra 2 beds and 2 baths with the extra area you could potentially develop on your site, subject to council approval, or you could increase your living space, or a combination of the two, and then it just allows them to formulate their own brief before launching into that full detailed process.
What we see sometimes with customers is that they're making a very big investment, you know, often in the millions of dollars, yet they really want to cut corners in a way on assessing the property. We often hear people say, look, I've got a builder friend or something who's going to give me advice about this stuff.
My uncle's a designer or builder.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I understand why that's valuable and why you would trust the advice of that person. I think the thing that's missing is detail and perhaps independence, because often I think friends and family will say what they think you want to hear because, you know, they already know you like the property. Rather than actually giving you a proper assessment. And there are risks associated with adding to properties. As you talked about, there's a council process, there's the risk of overcapitalising, and there's the question of, well, what's the best design for this place? And what will actually add the most value to the property, both in terms of what we're going to use it for, but as in terms of resale potential down the track. Do you see other businesses out there looking to offer that sort of shortcut approach?
It's a great question, Michael, and it's definitely something I think we all can relate to in the property market. Is there's a lot of backtracking that can happen because there's so many different players in the industry who can offer bits of advice, and actually every individual that we work with knows a different amount about property, so it's about trying to hone onto what is most important. And I guess to answer your question, that's where this business came about. It was to create an opportunity for agents to minimise the risk in the advice that they're giving by having the backing of an expert when it comes to not just a simple, that's what they did next door, therefore we can do it, but actually, is it heritage listed or in a conservation area? What might that mean? What is the zoning of the property? What are the height controls of the property? How much extra area are you permitted to develop on this property? And then also just architectural understanding of site opportunities and constraints when it comes to the topography of the site and maybe even the soil conditions. So that's in essence where the business came from, was as a response to some of the gaps in advice and the misadvice that can actually, I should probably rephrase misadvice, and the misinformation that gets communicated to a client.
I think what the service you're offering and the services that we offer, the opportunities are very similar, is that when we started our business, you know, about 10 years ago, the building inspection or the strata records inspection process was purely a buyer-driven process. It was a reactive process. I'm interested in buying this property, I need information, so I have to go and find the information. What we realised was there were two opportunities. The first opportunity was provide a higher level of service and a higher consistency of quality in terms of the information that we provide. But secondly, we realised there was a real opportunity here for the seller and the agent to provide better information and improve their service by offering a higher quality of information and more transparency in the buying process, because the information was coming from a third party and the buyer was still getting third party advice, but it was initiated through the agent or the vendor. And so while there's always, it's the buyer that is looking at your report or our reports, there's a massive benefit here for the seller and for the agent in perhaps even initiating this process. Imagine if a buyer comes along and they're not only delivered with information about the current condition of the property, but they're also given a report that tells them about what the potential opportunities might be for the place, and the opportunity to follow up with an independent person and ask questions about that. So I think there's a massive advantage here, and I think as you say, there's been a lot of broad brush statements made about property in the past, where whether it's coming from the agent or whether it's coming from people who've been providing very high level advice to buyers, that still leaves a lot of gaps and it creates uncertainty, and as a result it reduces confidence, as you were saying.
Absolutely.
What we're trying to do with our business is improve the confidence that people will have in making their decision, and that can also work for the seller.
Yes.
You know, obviously it's very important to buyers to feel confident about making a very big investment, but it can work really well for sellers as well, because it can make them more confident about the quality of the product they're selling. And that can take a lot of stress out of the process too. So the opportunity is here for sellers as much as agents, as much as buyers. And I think that's a really important aspect and an important feature of the service as well.
Absolutely. Like getting a real estate agent, they represent the product that is going to be sold.
Yes.
And every package of documentation that is lying on that table when interested buyers are walking through represents that product. So if that is of the utmost quality, and as you said, it's the biggest investment of someone's life, relative to that, spending that little bit extra money on getting the right quality outcome in your building inspector and also in our service as well can make the world of difference. And as you said, our property assessment report, which really complements the building inspection report, it is in essence opportunity driven and therefore does enhance the value offering. So similar to selling a property with an approved DA, typically the reason that the value is higher when you sell a property with that approved DA isn't because of the design. Often the people who buy that property, it's not that they love the design, but they can see what might be possible. In the end, they'll probably do their own DA, their own design, but they can at least see, that's great, we could get that extra bedroom and bathroom.
Yes.
And parking space and whatever.
Yeah. So your process will be a hell of a lot cheaper for the seller than going through a DA process.
Oh, absolutely.
And at the moment, sellers think, if I have that approved DA, then it demonstrates that opportunity. You can do that at a lower cost, but also not limit what the buyer can see to that one design and that one approval.
Yes.
The options out there will allow them to think about their own needs and will actually speed up their own process if they decide to do a DA themselves once they've bought the place.
You've hit the nail on the head, Michael. I wish you were doing my sales campaigns for me. That's absolutely right. The one time that agents say that having an approved DA on a sale detracts from the potential of that sale is because an interested buyer might look at it and go, I don't like it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes more information or too much information can be harmful to the sale. You want to get that sweet spot of just enough information to trigger something within that interested buyer to go, great, that might be possible. Now, the difference is obviously the advice that we're providing, it is aligning with council's objectives. However, it is not an approved DA, it is just meeting their guidelines. So there is still that next level of detail that you would get from a development application process to do your full design. But initially what you really need, as I said, it's not the full design, it's just the big picture understanding of what you can get and how much it might cost and what the process might be to get there.
The other thing that I think is really important to emphasise here is that, and this is something that we emphasise to agents quite a lot, is that the costs to sell a property are quite high. But the cost of doing the building inspection, or in our service for an apartment, is the lowest. It's the smallest cost in the whole selling process, where the vendor recognises the benefits of doing it. Now, while there's a cost to your service as well, again, it will be one of the cheapest elements of the selling process. And the value that can be generated, I think, shouldn't be underestimated. I think the opportunity here for agents, and it's similar to the point I made before, is that while there are standard elements and always have been to the cost, whether you advertise on the portals, domain, realestate.com,
styling,
whether you do some styling, the other elements of marketing, I think if agents then think about, well, by actually changing the way we do our marketing, we can actually present this property in a completely different way. And
it's a real point of difference for those agents, because there's not many places where they can have the opportunity to get this advice. But it is literally, the business is being created out of a necessity, out of a need, out of every interested buyer walking into a property and going, what can I do with the place? And an agent having two options, either saying what they think might be possible, which might put them at risk in terms of the advice that they're providing, or they say, don't know, talk to an architect, figure it out, and then suddenly your clients they don't know where to go or what to do. Instead, they can say, we've got this great company that we work with who can provide that advice to you, or if they're really nifty, they can have the property assessment report because the vendor has already organised it alongside the building inspection report on the table, ready to go.
You mentioned risk. and we've talked about that a couple of times already. And I think this is a really important area too for the sell side of the equation. Obviously for buyers there's always risk. There's unknowns when they buy a property. But because buyers do want more information, and if we just talk about apartments for a minute and think about some of the issues that have been around apartments recently, what we see in our business is buyers are wanting a lot more information about what's happening in that building. Well, I think buyers generally are much more information seekers than they used to be. And that's because information is easy to access online these days. So the opportunity to provide better information also provides the opportunity to lower the risk. Providing independent information and not just a report but follow-up support creates a much lower risk process as well, but an improved, independent, more transparent process, as I said before.
And that's absolutely touched on, I think, the other critical thing that interested buyers are looking for is that transparency, that honesty through the process. They want to know, for the biggest investment of their life, most likely, that they have all the right information. And as you said, the more information, the lower the risk. And for a small price to pay to lower the risk of what is millions of dollars, or hundreds of thousands of dollars, is probably one of the best investments you'll make, other than the property itself.
That's right. And look, one of the things that the real estate industry are pushing quite hard at the moment is that they want to be regarded as a profession. And one of the things that I think about that is that if you want to be regarded as a profession, then there are things you need to do to create that professional approach. It's easy sometimes to fall back into the sales process, and obviously because agents receive their payment as a commission, and so the sale is key, it's important. Sometimes it's easy for them to fall back into that sales process. If you've got all these additional elements of information available, then I think the property speaks for itself even more than it just the way it presents. And so I think it fits very well into where I think the industry would like to themselves to be headed.
So we've spoken about the quality of service, and I wanted to ask you, Michael, what are some of the biggest issues you face in terms of the output that you are providing and the other people who are providing a similar service in the industry, and making sure that the interested buyers, equally the vendors, understand the difference between these, the service of one building inspector to another?
Yeah, so it's an issue that comes up a lot. Some of it comes up around cost. So we have people contact us and they're just looking for the cheapest price. We're not the cheapest, but we're still reasonably competitive. The issue for these people is that they just need a report because somebody's told them they should get it. And so they're ticking a box. They're not actually really using the information and benefiting from the service element in that report. So I think one of the things I always emphasise here is that there's a report and there's a service. So a lot of the cheaper providers are just providing a report, and they're not really interested in going the extra mile to provide the service. So the way that we emphasise the service element of it, we make sure we follow up with everybody. We're very proactive about that sort of stuff, making sure that people get called back quickly, that type of stuff. Now that's all you can really do. And then the people who've used our service mostly like it, almost always like it, suits them. And so we get good feedback, we get good reviews, and we get good referrals. And where we're working with real estate agents and vendors, we get exactly the same thing. And so buyers who've experienced our service that's been generated by a vendor love the service, and if they're selling a property, which is pretty common, then they'll come back to us and say, I'd love to use your service when I'm selling the property because I could see the value it adds. So it's a constant issue because there's a lot of providers out there. And a lot of people are one-man bands and they're effectively selling their time. So for them, they'd rather earn some money from selling their time, and so sometimes they will cut their costs. But we have a variety of services too, and that means that the cost to the buyer can be quite low. because the vendor's also making a contribution to the service that we provide.
So what might some of the risks be where, you can see the difference between two property inspection reports? One, it's talking about things that are relatively superficial in terms of defects and issues with the building, and a really thorough building inspection report will retrieve information that might be critical to that sale of property. So what have you found in your experience?
So I think what's happened over time with building inspectors is that they've gone away from the purpose of the report. So all building inspection reports are prepared to meet an Australian standard, and that Australian standard says that they need to provide information about major defects or safety defects, and to provide an assessment, an overall assessment of minor defects. What we see with a lot of your average building inspection reports is that there's a lot of attention paid to very minor defects, a door that sticks, a door that's damaging a skirting or something like that. Very minor things that really don't have many impact on the structure. What we say to our building inspectors is that the more you focus on that really minor stuff, there's the higher the risk that you'll miss stuff that's more important. So I think the purpose of the report is to point out to the buyer and the seller, if that's the case, if there's major issues there or safety issues there that would impact on the buyer, but it can also impact on the sale of the property. So I think that's one area where I think we're providing better advice, because the buyer is much better to know about that major area.
It's short-sighted, I think, to think that if you're raising something that is considered a major defect, it's going to be harmful to the sale, because at the end of the day, the product that you're representing, if you are an agent, is of a high quality. And if you're happy to sweep the major issues under the rug, at the end of the day, as we said, what people are really looking for is that transparency. So being open and honest about the reality of buildings and the reality that they need work and they need maintenance. 2 months down the track, when they've bought that property and they're looking back at what service they had from that agent, they're much more likely to make recommendations for all of us within that property group. So
sometimes we'll say to agents that the major defect that they may not even be aware of is like an unexploded bomb at the property. Now, somebody will come along with their building inspector and they may find that defect 3 days before the auction, and it will torpedo their marketing campaign. Now, if we go and do an inspection that is initiated by the vendor and we find a major defect, then the vendor is much better off knowing that.
There's a strategy around that then.
They can develop a strategy around that. So they can either adjust their expectations, or they can actually take steps to remediate the problem. And if they do that work before the marketing starts, then it becomes a non-issue or less of an issue during the marketing campaign. Because a defect doesn't necessarily mean it's unfixable. In most cases, it's fixable. But the problem is if a buyer finds a property and then their defect is identified after they've seen the property, they lose confidence in the property. Now, a lot of sellers spend a lot of money getting the property painted, and they make it look good. But nobody is going into the roof, getting on the roof, getting under the house, looking for other issues that could also be fixed before marketing. And that's another benefit that our service provides, is it enables, and this is what I said before about making the seller feel more confident and less stressed about the selling process.
And we've got similar issues from the opportunity side. I mean, it's actually in some ways easier for us at Test Before You Invest because it is opportunity driven. There are so many opportunities when you're looking at moving forward rather than current condition. However, there are perceptions which people also have with what's possible on a property. For example, heritage listing. Sometimes people get afraid when they see that it's heritage listing. They think, oh no, that means I'm going to be restricted with what I can actually do with the site. However, as I said, there's opportunities in everything. The biggest opportunity with a heritage listing is that it means the character of the area is more likely to be maintained in the future. So if you really love that little street in Paddington because of all the row houses and the trees and how everything is sort of framed up, all the blocks are situated, it's more likely that 20, 30 years down the track it'll still have that same beautiful character because it's heritage listed. So similarly for you, it's you might be raising certain things that need to be raised in terms of minor defects, major defects, but within that there are opportunities as well, as I said, to instill that confidence in that buyer and have them manage their expectations up front.
Yes, no, that's right. So one of the things that I guess we haven't talked about specifically is types of properties, and you just mentioned heritage properties, heritage houses, I suppose, and I guess there'll be small apartment blocks that are heritage listed as well. You know, that have that sort of historical importance. So with your test before you invest product, where do you see the product adding the most value? And I think where you'll start is to say houses, but I've just mentioned those small, older apartment blocks. Do you see value with those types of buildings as well?
It's a great question, Michael, and as you said, the place that I see where we can really optimise and add the most value is in houses, semis, terraces and so on. However, there is still great opportunity to provide assistance for apartments as well. For apartments, typically it's a more customised assessment because every strata report is different. It has their own set of bylaws and rules. So typically what I would say is for the houses we can do the comprehensive property assessment report. For the apartments, it's best to start with a consultation and we walk through the apartment, and again it's really important to work with EYEON because you guys will prepare the strata report, which we absolutely need to assess before we can tell our client, yes, you can move that wall, whether it's structural or not, or can you relocate the bathroom, because we have to understand, you know, what's the stacking system and what are the nuances in their particular bylaws about what you can change. And
so just for the people watching, so in a strata scheme, the bylaws add another level of compliance, if you want, don't they? So if somebody wanted to do even just a minor renovation where they wanted to change the flooring, bylaws may not allow wooden flooring just because of noise, just as a very simple example. So it's just something else that people need to understand. So as well as needing to comply with council rules, they also need to comply with the rules for the community. And that's what the bylaws are, is they are the rules for that community that you live in.
It's to help protect the community, you know. So as you said with the flooring example, typically they might even have a specific rating of acoustic underlay that you need to put under whatever the floor they would permit you to have. So if you were allowed to have timber, it would be really stringent on what you have underneath. And as I said, it's not a problem, it's just things that we need to be aware of, and I think that's what's probably a really nice way to recap what we've been talking about today is the key is educating our audience, both agents, individual interested buyers and vendors as well, as to the importance of quality service and good customer service, as this is such a big investment in someone's life.
Well, Nikki, it's been great chatting to you today, and I think we've covered a lot of territory. There's a hell of a lot of information there for people, and obviously in terms of following up with you, they can go to your website, testbeforeyouinvest.com.au, and then people coming to us, eyon.com.au. I hope you'll come and see. There's a lot of information on both our websites about the services we provide, and of course you can always call us, and we're happy to talk on the phone if there's additional information available. So thanks again, Nikki.
Thank you very much, Michael.